Just thank you for being here. Thank you for the work you're doing. Some of you don't know who I am. One of my books is right there. It calls you back. The main book is the main book is Always Raining. And I have a lot of other books. Some of them I brought here just to show you. What I want to do is just say a few words, but we're going to get something to eat. Get something to eat, and then we'll come back and talk some more. But what I want to do is make sure that you're aware about some of the... I've been working in Chicago for 15 years in the streets, like many of you. I grew up in LA. I'm back in LA, but I've also been doing this around the country. I also have been working in prison for 20 years, mostly in California, but really about in 20 states. And I've also done prisons in Mexico, in El Salvador, Guatemala. I worked with bandit kids in Honduras. I went to prisons in Argentina. And I've been to prisons in England and Italy. I've been to other places. The work, again, is similar to you. I'm trying to get people to understand the value of their life so they can understand the value of our life. You understand what I'm saying? And many people don't know they have value. And some of you might know that my son joined a Chicago gang. He was involved with the gangs here in Chicago. He ended up doing 13 and a half years in the Illinois prison system. So he's living with me now. He's doing really good. He's been out for about 13 years. He's getting as much time out. He had a hard time, like everybody, getting out of prison. Getting back in the world, had a hard time, but I stood by him. I stood by him even before the prison, during prison, after prison. Now he does what you do. He goes into the juvenile facilities, works with the troubled kids. His partner, working with him, did 30 years in the California prison system, and he's going in there working with the kids in juvenile facilities and some of the schools. So he's closer to their world than I am, but I'm from that generation way before that. Because he's 48 years old, he's like their dad. I'm like their cool granddad. Just like their granddad. So, but you know, there's generational things. Because my involvement in gangs go back to the 60s and 70s. I can tell you how things were there. But I've also seen all the evolution of the gangs in LA and in Chicago ever since then. And then coming back to LA. And there's, again, I got some international things I can share with you. But also nationally what's happening. Some of the good things, because I was just telling you here that when I was doing this work, we didn't have all this stuff. We didn't have organizations like what you're involved in. We were doing it on our own. We didn't get paid. We were out there doing stuff in the streets. And I was working in 12 communities in Chicago, including La Villita and others. And then groups started sprouting out. Some of them got funding. Little by little started getting some things, but we didn't quite have this. And I'm really glad to see people out there trying to change the lives of our young people. I also have, of course, a lot of family here in Chicago. Have a daughter here, have grandkids here. I have great grandkids. Most of them are in the rest of the parts of Illinois. So this is my second home, Chicago. I come here quite often. So I hope that maybe in the future, I'll come back and do some more things. I really am open to your questions more than anything. I just wanted to let you know at least my background. I'm getting ready. I've been this year alone. I travel all over the place. I was in Cuba. I was in Puerto Rico. I was in Canada. I was in England. Just came back from England, went to a prison there. I'm going to Mexico. I was in Guadalajara working with some of the street kids there. And then I'm going to Mexico City. And then right after that, I'm going to Colombia again to do this work. Because people invite me because of my reputation, my books, and everything else. I've learned a few things. Obviously, I don't know a lot. You guys know a lot more than I do, so I really am be open to hear from you and we use your stories. That to me is important. Sharing stories. I was just telling my granddad, a sad thing. I don't mind telling you guys now. Even though we kept my grandkids out of the life, they weren't hood, they weren't into the streets. The world still got them, and I lost a grandson to fentanyl last November. This coming November will be a year. And that's heartbreaking. I went to have to go to his funeral to see my grandson's body, 22-year-old. And then his sister, my granddaughter, ended up in prison for crystal meth. She just got out. So she's in a parolee housing here in Chicago, and I went to see her today. And she seems to be doing good. She seems to be in good shape. I'm hoping. She's 29 years old, and even though we do all we could for our kids, nobody's immune. There's always something's going to come get them, but we have to keep trying. Most kids are doing good, and all kids are worth it. You know what I'm saying? All of them. I've worked with so many. I've lost so many. I've been to a lot of funerals, but I kept doing the work. I tell people this is not for everybody, because the heartbreak. You have to have a hard heart. And I don't mean hard heart like cold. I mean, you got to go through a lot of heartbreak, but you got to keep going. You got to keep doing this work no matter how hard it is. People depend on us. And now we're training the next generation, which I'm sure you all are doing, the next generation of people that are going to be out there in the streets with everybody. So that's just a little personal note, but for me, it's never ending. And really quickly, and then I'm going to open it up to you all, or we get some food. That might be better. My personal involvement, again, I wrote it in Always Running, was, this is in the late 60s. People say, well, I wasn't as hardcore. It was heavy duty in the 60s. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I was 11 years old when I joined the gang. At 12 years old, I started doing heroin. I didn't do it intravenously until I was 15, but I was already using it. I was already doing everything, the street huffing, the whole thing, every drug you can imagine. At 13, I was getting arrested. I was in jails all over the East LA area, and I also was in juvenile hall, which is now, LA has the largest juvenile facility. It used to be the Hollywood. Now LA has the largest juvenile facility in North America. And I was also in 2 adult facilities. I was arrested for murder when I was 16. 3 people dead. They really couldn't get me for it, so they had to let me go. I was attempted murder when I was 17. And I didn't do those murders, by the way, it doesn't matter, that's just what happened. But I did shoot somebody when I was 17, and then all the witnesses were gone. So they let me go. I stabbed somebody, and I was in a lineup for that, and the guy was so scared to death he couldn't pinpoint it was me. You know what I'm saying? I've been through a lot of things. But at 18, unfortunately, I got involved with fights with cops, and they actually got me. I got convicted. Short time, because I was supposed to do many years in prison, just so you know the story. But by then, I had already started changing my life. I had already started helping community. I was already doing things. I started painting murals with graffiti artists, painting all these murals. This is in 1971. I painted 10 murals with 13 gang kids. And so they went to the judge with letters, and people showed up and said, you know what, this kid, bad news, but he's also done some good. And the judge says, I've never seen anybody show up for anybody before. He gave me a break, gave me time served in the county jail, gave me lesser charges. I walked out of the county jail, this is like 45 years ago, and I've never gone to jail or prison for any criminal act since then. I was really taken by the community that stood up for me. And I always felt responsible to make sure I can live up to them. You know what I'm saying? But I did go back to help. And I've been doing that for 40 years. I started in Chino Prison in California, doing creative writing. Then I've also done poetry, and I've also done healing circles, and I've done talks all over the place. I just came back. I went to Lompoc, the federal facility in California. I went to a women's jail, and then in England, like I was telling you, I went to a high-end prison there. There was a kind of a gang in Liverpool, and they put them in this prison, and they wanted me to talk to them. And my wife, who knows my work, she's now never been in the street, never been in, she's gone to prison to visit my son and other family members, but she never did. She went in there with me. And she does beautiful Mexica indigenous songs in Nahuatl, and she does a ceremony. She did it with these people from England, and they loved it. They, first they thought, "Whoa, these Mexicans, who are they?" But they loved it, and we had a good time. So that's the kind of work I do. What I would like to do then is see if you guys get something to eat, get your food, sit down, and then we'll talk some more, right? Get some questions, and I want to hear from you all, okay? So I can give you a bill of goods and you'll buy it. I'm just kidding. The one thing I wanted to say is that, like I said, in the 60s and 70s, both in LA and Chicago, it wasn't lightweight. People would think, in the 90s, things got really bad. I get it, but it was heavy duty then. The difference was it wasn't everybody. And even in my neighborhood, we weren't recruiting everybody. Now the gangs recruit everybody, anybody, all kinds of people. In those days, just so you know, the difference was that we needed to know who you were. You know what I mean? You needed to trust who you're dealing with. You couldn't just show up and say, I want to be in your gang. You know what I'm saying? I said, well, who the heck are you? And I'm using nice words. I really wouldn't use those words. The thing that we had is what we call palabra. You know what I'm talking about. Palabra means your word. And you have to trust people. And I didn't know it. I was 11 years old. I'm very empty inside. My family's not a very good family. I'm in the streets. And I'm believing everything these guys say because it sounds great, you know. Hey, we'll be there for each other, have each other's back. We're always going to be there. We're familia now, you know what I'm saying? And they were all lost boys like me. And then you recruit people like that. Now, what I didn't know, and I'm sure you guys know this, youth gangs aren't really youth gangs. They're run by men, but they're made up of youth. And the men weren't all that older guys. They were maybe over 18, 19, or 20, whatever, but they were running things. They were the ones telling you what to do, what not to do. It wasn't youth telling things. Because I remember us kids, we wanted to play football, we wanted, you know, even in the little gang, we had our own little things. They were putting a stop to all that. And then they wanted you to do crimes. You start small, you'd be in a car, see a bike, steal that bike, get on that bike and go. You start small, then you start stealing cars. How do you do that? You got to learn how to steal cars. You know, then we had the chop shops, you know, where you would take the cars, take them all down. Nobody could find them, and all those parts were being sold. And East LA had these row of junkyards, whole Mission Boulevard, nothing but junkyards, and that's where everybody would bring all this stuff. Made a little bit of money. Then you started burglarizing people's homes, and this is before even the drugs was happening. But you know, you burglarize people's homes. I remember where people would come in there and try to steal TVs. And don't bother with that stuff. Steal money, jewelry, guns. Really? Yeah. And they wanted guns. You know what I'm saying? This is in the 60s. I didn't know that we were being prepared for something. When we fought, just prior to 1970, it was all what we call pleito guantes. They're just, you know, buffing it out with people. It wasn't really guns, and maybe a guy would throw a knife, but basically you didn't have to prove yourself. All of a sudden, 1970, I still remember, everybody wanted guns. And a lot of it was Vietnam vets were coming out. And not all the vets were like this. Most vets came home, had their families, but a lot of them weren't that, you know what I'm saying, they got mentally scarred. And they came into the neighborhood, and then they were toughening us up. They were soldiers, and they were making us soldiers, you know what I'm saying? And we had to learn, because we would have guns and we know what we were doing. We took them to the mountains above LA, San Gabriel's, and learned how to shoot. This is in the 60s. In other words, I'm telling you, we were being like an army of children for other people that I didn't know who they were, older guys. That's why I say youth gangs aren't really youth gangs. I thought they were. I thought I was with my homies. You know, hey, we start a little club. You know, hey, we just gonna hang. We never called gangs. You know, my little club here, so whatever, my clique or whatever it was. Pretty soon now, the big gangs come in, the big value gangs, and they start getting you, and they're getting you into that world. Heroin came in really heavy duty. Not everybody was doing heroin, but I, one of those, fell right into it, because it all depends on how empty you are. You know what I'm saying? Whatever you need to fill, every drug there was, I took everything. I was an equal opportunity drug user. But like everything, heroin ends up pushing all of it aside. And then they groom you with heroin. You know, when you start by snorting it, you start by putting it on your weed sticks, you start putting it in your cigarette. We used to call it super cools if you had cigarette with heroin. Then pretty soon you start skin popping it. You know what I'm saying? Just put it in the muscles, you know, because you're preparing them to start intravenously. You don't want to start them that way because they're going to OD or they're going to whatever, you know, you little by little. And then pretty soon you're hurting and you need it intravenously. And that's what happens. And then you're in that world. You're in that drug world. Now you eat heroin all the time. And that's the world that I was being groomed for. I didn't understand it. I didn't know there were older men pulling the strings. I just fell into it, and the empty, lost kids, like a lot of us. Nothing to do, familia's not all there. We just, hey man, I'll do anything. I gave my life over to the gang, you know what I'm saying? I didn't have any for myself. It was the barrio, we called it, you know, whatever the barrio needs, I'm there, man. You need me something, you need something, I'm there, man. And then pretty soon we want you to start doing heavy duty crimes, hijackings, all the, coming into LA, all the big truck stops. big hijacking big trucks, taking a lot of merchandise. Pretty soon you're doing banks, you're doing big stores. You know what I'm saying? Little by little, you're preparing yourself. And the whole goal was to get you into the prisons, which we call the pinta. That's what we call it. You get into the pinta, so that then you get room to run things out of the prisons. This is all, I didn't know this till a little bit later. I realized that this is all part of somebody's plan. It actually started with the old Pachucos, because the Pachucos were getting arrested in large numbers. Remember the Pachuco riots? Nobody talks about the martial law and all the cops that were going around arresting every Pachuco and every Mexican kid. And they put them into they had just a Chicano tank in the county jail in LA, just for Chicanos. There was so many of them. And the blacks too. But there was a whole separate tank for just Chicanos. And then they were getting into the prison system. They put them all in San Quentin. They thought, if we put all the Mexicans in one prison, we'll control them. Big mistake. Because out of San Quentin, they figured out a way to control what was happening in the streets.
Wow.
And then they made the mistake of dispersing them throughout the prison system, and then they did it from every prison. They had it's funny thing about Mexicans, just like black people, if we put our mind to it, we can do anything. We don't get into the big upper classes, upper system things, but you can see that if you can do this in prison, you can control things. I know this happened in Chicago. I know blacks had a big role in this, and then Puerto Ricans and Mexicans and everything, but I say, well, if you put them in the government, if you put them in the industries, they'll do the same thing, they'll do good. You know what I'm saying? We'll be as good as anybody, even better. We became so good in prison that all the other people looked at us and they started emulating what we were doing, because nobody did it better. You know what I'm saying? Put you in sports, and guess what? The best sports people. I was just looking at Simone Biles. How many black girls were gymnasts? Look at, once they're there, and now they're taking over everything. And remember when Serena and Venus, tennis wasn't a black thing, but then got in there, they learned, they became the best. You know what I'm saying? Boxing, it used to be all white thing. Irish immigrants and other immigrants. Once blacks and Mexicans got in, guess what? Best boxers, Puerto Ricans, best boxers. So I'm thinking, you know what, we can be good at anything, they just limit what we can be good at. You see what I'm saying? And prison was a good place. We could be good in prison, man. We could run a lot of things. I just wish there was doors open for a lot of other things, so it wouldn't be just that. I just mentioned all that because I figured out there's a design for all these things. And I figured that it wasn't my plan, it wasn't our plan, it wasn't the body plan. Somebody else had a plan and we fell into it. And then I'm trying to teach people about having your own plan, having your own sense of yourself, finding your own way. Not just give yourself over to others or to heroin, which I did for 7 years. Turn everything over to heroin. Learn to give to yourself. You know what I'm saying? People don't know how to give to themselves. Whatever the barrio says, or whatever the homies say, whatever whatever it is, they're going to do that. Young girls, unfortunately, they do with the guys. Whatever, they fall in love with a guy and he's no good, and they do whatever the guy says. Like I said, I have a granddaughter in prison. She was dealing with 40, 50-year-olds, she's in her early 20s, 40, 50-year-old guys controlling her. They had her prostituted, my granddaughter. They had her on crystal meth. They had her doped up. We could never find her. She was all over the state of Illinois, and then she went up in Wisconsin. We were trying to track her down. We couldn't find anybody. You know what I'm saying? How can we help her? And there was these older guys we found out that were using her. She fell in love with one of those guys, and she gave him everything. You know what I'm saying? So I even tell the young girls and I tell the young men, don't turn everything over to anybody or anything. Have something for yourself. The most important part should be for you. What do you want to do? What do you want to be? What are you about? So I mention all that because, again, I did the same thing. I turned everything over. I was homeless for 3 years because my parents had kicked me out of the house. And when you're homeless, you're stealing. I had a handgun I would use to mug people on all the tourist spots. I had my encampments. I never slept in the same place twice. I didn't trust nobody. I only trusted my body. I didn't trust nobody else. So everybody would say, hey, come and hang with us. I ain't gonna hang with nobody. During the day, I don't mind hanging with the homeless people or anybody, with the addicts, but by myself. I would find abandoned cars, abandoned buildings. I would find, and the LA River had all these little spots. I called them cubby holes, where you can find a place to stay. And then the other tributaries of the river, I would be there. I have my own little encampment. Now there's encampments all over LA. It's like everybody took our idea. Now, it used to be just the hood rats, with the encampments. Now everybody's got encampments. It's like, but that's how we lived. That's how we survived. I saw a lot of people die from heroin. I lost 25 friends by the time I was 18. Heroin overdoses, killing by other rival gangs, and 4 were killed by police. 3 of them were my best friends. So I didn't really want any more best friends. They were all dying. You know what I'm saying? The fortunate thing in my case, and I have to say it, these are blessings that I understand. I know people say, well, God's on your side. I don't quite see it that way. That's just me. And the only reason why is because I just never, I couldn't understand why God wasn't on their side. The people didn't make it. But if people say, well, it's a mystery, okay. I accept there's mysteries. I'll accept the mystery. I don't have to answer it. You know what I'm saying? People want to say, well, God wasn't there. You know what? I don't believe that. I know what, far better people than me got shot once. I got shot at 6 different times. I don't know if many of you have been shot. I've never got hit. How in the world, 6 different occasions, point blank range, and I never got hit. How does that work out? God's on your side. I don't know. It's a mystery, and I don't have to answer all the mysteries. I just have to, they're mysteries, that's fine. I accept it. The one thing I do have to do is make something of what I've been getting. If I survived all this nonsense, if I survived all the jails and getting my throat practically cut, standing up to everybody, the heroin overdoses, the nights with no home, if I survived everybody getting shot in the war, the soldiers that we were all being created on the streets, then I better do some good with that. That's the one thing I do know. That's one thing I can control. And I've been trying to do that ever since. And it's sad when my own son gets involved in gangs here, to see your own son in there, and that's why I wrote Always Running, that other book, because I wanted to tell. Now this story is a sequel, it's more about me and my son. I recommend it because, we should read Always Running, but you don't need to read one after the other. You can just start with this one if you want. It stands on its own. And the reason why it calls you back is even though I left the heroin, I was 7 years on it, I left the street life, we call it La Vida Loca, that's what we called it, the crazy life. I left it, the madness will call you back. It does it with rage. I drank for 20 years after I let go of the drugs. I lost a lot of relationships, but the worst thing that happened, it called my son. You know what I'm saying? My son got pulled in, and you don't want to see your son. I just tell you honestly, and then I'll open it to you. When I was 20 years old, I had my son. I had a situation of a kid when I was 17 that this is just the reality of the streets. I never know what happened. I didn't want this kid. She got pissed off and ran off. And my brothers and my sister went to look for her. She couldn't find her. I don't know if she ever had this baby. In my heart, I don't think she did. You know what I'm saying? I have a feeling my heart would say, you got another kid out there. But that's the way it was. Kids were popping out everywhere. But the one son, my first son, when I was 20. I was married to my high school sweetheart. She was 2 months out of high school when I married her. And we had this beautiful son. And it changed my life. He saved me. You know what? I don't know about some people. Some people have kids, it doesn't matter. I held my son and I'm like a changed man. You know what I mean? I don't want to go back to La Vida Loca. I was in and out of trying to stay out of drugs. I held him and I changed my life. The sad thing is years later, and I have another daughter with her, and then I have 2 other kids from another wife. But the sad thing about him, years later, I'm in Chicago. Me and his mom broke up and everything, so that wasn't really in his life. He saw me as abandoning him. You know what I'm saying? And it's kind of sad. Why would I abandon the son to save me? But that's just the way what happens. I was drinking too much. I was having too many relationships. I moved out of here. He got in too much trouble in East LA that she sent him over to me when I was 13 years old. And she said, "You take care of him now." Well, he's my son. I couldn't say no, but he didn't want anything to do with me. You ain't my dad. You know what I'm talking about. You ain't my dad. 13 years old, man. And he would run off, run away. We were living in Humboldt Park. And I remember that I have this story in the book where I'm chasing him down the street. He's running off. I'm yelling at him because I'm trying to be a dad, but I'm not very good at it. You ain't going to do that. I'm trying to be a tough dad, And he just gave me the finger and ran off. I went chasing him down the streets of Humboldt Park. And I remember, man, that he was climbing fences and jumping through gangways. And he was like disappearing and appearing. He's from in and out of buildings, and I'm trying to chase that. And I was really big there. I lost like 60 pounds. I was bigger, and I'm trying to huff and puff, trying to chase him. And man, I was like, man, my son. But I remember the way I felt. He was like, at that time, he was like 14 to 15 years old, and he had just joined the gang in
We went to Clemente High School. Man told me, you ain't gonna be no gang. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to be this tough dad, you know. And he ran off. I saw him running, guess what? I saw myself when I was his age, running. And I heard my screams, you know, the way he was, you're not my dad, you know, all those terrible things. You have to go through this stuff, it's hard. And I remember I was so pissed off at him that I was gonna change the locks to our little apartment there, and then I was gonna close all the doors. My dad had done that, my mom had done that, threw me out. I couldn't do it. And I realized, you know, I can't. I'm not gonna abandon him. It was a hard decision because I had a new wife and I had two new babies, and my daughter ended up coming. She's a bit teenage troublemaker, but I told my son, he doesn't even remember this. I told him, you know what I told you? I'm not gonna let you go. I'm gonna go through this roller coaster through hell with you. Wherever you're going, I'll be there. And it was hard because I saw him get shot. I saw him shoot people. Not that I saw him shoot people. He did that stuff. I went in the juvenile facilities. I went to the jails picking him up, and then finally he gets arrested for shooting at two police officers and for shooting this one guy who was dying, but he survived. Thank God, it would have been murder. He was in the hospital. His daughters were crying, and this guy didn't want anything to do with my family. Of course, my son just shot him, and he was a truck driver. And my son had a road rage thing. It wasn't even a gang thing. He just lost it in a road rage. He's a truck driver, and wherever the guy told him, my son got pissed off, got his gun, went out, stepped outside in the middle of traffic there in the middle of Chicago, and shoots him. And then he realizes, oh man, what have I done? You know how, you know, the moment of madness, you realize, and then he goes in the car and he takes off, and sure enough, there's a cops not too far away. They saw the whole thing. They came and chased him down, and he's thinking, it's time for me to die. So he turns around on the one-way street right there near downtown, came down and starts shooting at the cops. You know, it was like the end of the world for him. Again, blessings. The cop shot back. He didn't get hit. He got the car. I don't know what happened to the car. He stopped or it broke down or whatever. He got out of the car and he wanted to shoot himself, and the gun jams. Just it's just going to do this. I mean, I'm telling you, you can't write this in the script. This is the way you can't know. So then he throws the gun on the car and runs to a liquor store and tries to hide. And the cops around the liquor store, and the liquor store guy's telling him, he's right here in the freezer area. Okay, they get him. They were so mad. He shot at two police officers. They were so mad. They pulled him out in the middle of the winter of Chicago, took his clothes off in the middle of the street, took him out, got him into the paddy wagon, beat the hell out of him. He said there was a blood all over the floor. They were beating the hell out of him. Took him to, I forget which station it was. I think it was Wood Street, and beat the heck out of him for 11 hours. We couldn't find him. I got a lawyer. She went all over. She found him. She put a stop to it. She actually, we know where he's at. She went to the station. You know, you can't do that. You know, she went and stopped him and everything. And he already got 11 hours getting beat up. And then, but now he's facing 40 years to life. This is this baby that saved me, and I couldn't save him. You know what I'm saying? It was heartbreaking. I couldn't save my own son. He was like, but here he was, grown man, grown teenager. He was a little older. He'd already done one prison term when he was 17, like about a year and a half, and he gets out. I thought he was done, but at 21, he gets involved with this. So now he's facing 40 years to life. And we decided to fight the life sentence, not to get him off, because my son even said, hey, can you get me out? I can't get you off, son. You're going to do your time, but I don't think you should be thrown away either. You know what I'm saying? So we fought the life sentence. He ended up getting 28 years. And it fell, you know, the Truth in Sentencing law in Illinois. It was declared unconstitutional, I'm sure you were, for a certain period of time. I think it was 97. And he fell in between several thousand guys fell in where they didn't have to do 85 to 100%. So he can get out with half the time, with good time. And then they redid the law. I don't know if you remember, they redid it, so now they have to do that. So he was blessed again. So with half the time, 14 years of 28, he gets through that, and they give him 6 months off anyway, so he did 13 and a half years of that here in the state of Illinois. I mention all these things just so you know this is very personal. I talked about my grandson, my grandkids, my granddaughter. and see my son in this world. But I never could give up on him, and I stood by him. Even in prison, I stood by him. I wrote him a letter every month, whether he didn't even write me, but I knew he was reading my letters, because one month I didn't do a letter, and he called me and said, "Where's my letter?" So he's reading it. So okay, so I keep writing him. And if I visit him, all the prisons that he was in Illinois, I even moved to LA because I have my daughter and 2 kids. And we were and now by then we were in Logan Square. And I'm not talking about, this is when it was still street, it was still barrio, it wasn't gentrified like all that area is now. And I was gonna lose more kids, you know what I'm saying? I'm gonna lose them. So I decided I've gotta go back to LA. And I love Chicago, by the way, I do, I've had to live here my whole life. But I had no family here. So we ended up, my wife had a big family, she had 11 siblings. They had nephews and cousins, whatever. It was the right move. We moved back to LA in the year 2000. And I helped my son, helped my daughter get stabilized, just with family. LA's rough, but with family it helps. So they avoided all that. And I stood by my oldest son. I would come to Illinois, visit him. Where prison he was at, I would come. His mom ended up moving from East LA to here. Now she lives in Wisconsin. She never left. She stood by him. So I'm just mentioning all these things. This is just what happens. Yeah, all those years I was working with other gang kids. I started the Youth Struggling for Survival. In '93, we started the group. We started in '92, and it had 12 different communities we were working, including Little Village and Pilsen and the 10th Ward guys over in, the teens over there. And then we had Uptown kids and, all kinds of neighborhoods. And I did the Peace Network was all the groups that did do work. And that's how I met Guillermo. And you guys, I don't know if you remember. Yeah, that's how I met him. And he just got out of prison, and we started working with him. So I've been doing all this work all these years. And I think in many ways we might have pioneered a lot of things, but I don't really know. I think we did a lot of good things. I just really glad to see this, that you're all here, you're all helping. If you come out of the institutions, you're there to help people get their lives together, because we need it. All these kids need it. And I know that things have changed in LA, different to Chicago. I just want to share with you something that I can leave here with you guys. I only have one copy of this, but maybe I should leave it with Randy or somebody. When I went back to LA, I started working with all the gangs there too. And we ended up creating this effective community-based gang intervention. And we spent 2 years with 40 gang experts, urban peace advocates, researchers, and with no pay. Got them all together for 2 years creating this plan to how to help kids who are in trouble. And it led to Measure J in LA County, which meant you weren't going to put youth into prisons anymore. LA incarcerated more youth than any other city. They've closed down almost all the institutions now. Another diversionary program for youth. And a lot of it was this. And just so you know, the city approved it, and we haven't put it in Congress. I wrote the bill for the Congress, but unfortunately in Congress they never approved it, But I wrote a bill based on this, that you just put money into streets, helping kids, hiring people to do this work, and put it everywhere. We asked for $1 billion, no, it's $5 billion to do this program. And of course, people in Congress opposed it, tough on crime people, no, you can't do that. But we have the bill's in here. It's still very relevant. Now, things have changed, maybe you know how to do it better. So this is just a model to look at. It's not like something that's gonna help you guys anymore than you will already know. But I'm gonna leave it here in case you wanna look at it. Again, it took a lot of people. It was Black and Brown. We worked with all the Bloods and Crips guys that were working them, and then with all the Sureño guys, which is the Mexican gangs. And then according to Central America's MS-13, I was working with them, and the 18th Street and all that. So we work with all of them just to develop this kind of work. So I'm gonna leave this with you all. And then again, I just want to share with you this book, because you can get them anywhere, but this book is the book I wrote about my work in Chicago, Hearts and Hands, Creating Community in Violent Times. This is the book that tells you all the things that I went through, helping the young people, and some of the good and bad things that came out of it. Of course, this is a book of essays. It has a chapter about my work in prisons, and then this is the sequel to Always Running, and then I wrote a children's book. And this is for California gangs, but they use it all over the country. Somebody gave me that thing, how do you help a gang kid when he's joining a gang? Can you write a children's book for them? So I actually did that, and it's my second most popular book. Always Running is my bestseller. This is my second bestseller. And it has a little bit of our story, but also has real kids. The author used real kids. And for a children's book, it's the only one that has somebody shot. I know that's hard. People have told me, you can't have that, but you know what? It's used in these schools where the kids see this. You know, they walk over bodies, you know what I'm saying? And so it actually, now I didn't have her killed, she ends up in a wheelchair, but it's a story that I wanted to tell that wakes this young boy, his cousin, her cousin, to what's going on. I needed to tell that story. So these books are available. I can definitely recommend you try to get them. The only other book I have here, which I can pass this around, this a little bit more of, I went back to my old neighborhood. So even though I left the gang, and I even tried to bring gang peace in the early 70s, Chicanos were the first ones to sit down and do gang peace. Before the Bloods and Crips, before the gang peace here in Chicago. This is the early 70s. Unfortunately, it got infiltrated. The police played a bad role in undermining it. You couldn't trust nobody. I had peace circles, and we used to have decoy meetings so that the police would show up to the wrong meeting and arrest those guys while we were having the real meeting over here. And I know it happened here because I talked to people who were doing the same work here. And so this gives you a little bit of background, but also the pictures, the old neighborhood, some of the old homies. But I met with 5 of the guys from my old neighborhood who I couldn't talk to for many, many years. I went back to the neighborhood, talked to them. They changed their lives. These guys did 20, 30 years in prison. Some shot, some heroin for 20 some years. They changed their lives, and so I'm telling their story. The story of redemption. True stories of redemption from drugs, gangs, and prison. And at the very end of the book here, near the end, again, this is my gang. It's all of us after a football gang with the gang. Insignia. This is early 70s. I also went and met with my former enemy. Had dinner with him. His name is Freddy Negrete. He shot at me again. I didn't get hit, but he shot at me with a shotgun, and you know I survived it. But I went and tried. I threw a Molotov cocktail at his house. You know, tried to burn down his house. It's just terrible things we were doing, man. He shot homeboys of mine, and I know people were trying to get him. We became friends because he became a big tattoo artist. He's the leading Chicano tattoo artist in the world. They call him Coyote, Freddy Negrete. He's got a big shop in Hollywood with all these big tattoos. They pay big bucks for him. Now he does Hollywood with people. He goes to Hollywood studios. He did all the tattoos for Blood In, Blood Out. You know, he's just really well known. But I wasn't getting in touch with him, but what happened is his son got killed by my homies. And I don't know these guys. These are young guys. And I reached out to him. Can you imagine? Look, everything happened to my sons, my family, except for my grandson. Nobody got killed. You know what I'm saying? And I was really taken back. And I had dinner with him. And I said, let's talk, let's see what we can do. Look what happened to our son. My son was in prison at that time. His son was dead. And we had a really beautiful talk, and we started doing some work together. And then his other son, he had 2 sons. The other son died of heroin. So I had to go visit him again. And it's sad. I said, man, this guy lost 2 sons. We're very good friends now, and we're working together on some, that's not gonna happen maybe will. That's him working his tattoos. On a movie script about one of the guys that the cops killed. And this, by the way, is his famous, you might have heard, he created the Smile Now, Cry Later with the theater mask. It's kind of famous with all the neighborhood guys. And he's the one that first started it. And he put that on my back. I got that on my back. Yeah. And I told him to do it to honor our relationship. Yeah, you know. But that's who he is. He's doing good. We're all doing. And then these are the homeboys of mine. This is us older guys, and now we're all old men. You know, trying to do some good in the world. You know what I'm saying? So I just want to leave that, and then open up to you. Any questions, comments, challenges, whatever you might have. I know you guys had some good meals, so hopefully we'll have some nice, good questions and see what you all think. And, he didn't really know what was going on, but he kind of had an idea that I was in that world. When my son got involved, I had to tell him my story because I wanted to really stop him. I didn't know how to do it. Again, I couldn't. I was trying to stop him, And he ran off, I couldn't. So I brought him back home, but now I had to, how am I gonna help him? So I decided, and I became a writer. I was a journalist first, and then I ended up doing poetry here in the Chicago scene. I got very famous here in poetry. And then I started writing the book because I thought, hey, I can do it. Some people don't got the writing skills, I mean, I learned. I was a kid, when I was a little kid, 6 years old, in Watts. I grew up in Watts, and then I moved to the East LA area. They would slap me across the face if I spoke Spanish. And so they didn't teach us English very well. You know what I'm talking about. In those days, you were punished. So my revenge, in quotes, was to learn how to write so that I can tell my story. And I did. I went and learned how to write. I never finished college. I just went to school and I learned, started writing these books. And that book came out because I needed to help my son. And other people liked him because in Humboldt Park, I was seeing all his friends. And I would bring them into my house. Some of them lived with me. I would have them live with me. They had no place to go. They were homeless like I was homeless. I hadn't, lived. And by the way, all the gang kids that lived with us, all of them were really good to us. People would say, oh, yeah, the gang kids. They were hardcore gang kids, but they never messed with us. Only one of them did. He was a kleptomaniac. He couldn't stop stealing. And we had to find a move him out. But other than that, and he felt bad about it. He just couldn't help himself. He needed some help. But the point is, I wrote it for my son. And then what I would say to start, especially interview, it's something you're interested in, you think you've got the chops to do that, which is good. It helps kids, man. It does help. The book is used in all kinds of schools. And I would say just start writing it. And if anybody needs any help with how to get published, I don't mind talking to anybody about that, if anybody needs that. Because I even started a publishing house to do these kind of books. And I like redemption stories. So I usually try to do that. But I would recommend you tell your story if that's how you want to do it. You can do it other ways. You can do it by talking, you can do it by music, you can do it a lot of ways. I'm actually working on a documentary on this guy that works with my son. He did 30 years in prison. He was a leader of the Piru Bloods in LA, heavy duty gangster they called Little Evil. Everybody, he kill people, he did a lot of terrible things for over 30 years. But one day he's sitting in segregation site, and poetry comes to his mind, and he never did poetry. And he didn't have nowhere to write, so I don't know how he ended up getting a way to, he started writing on the walls of his cell. And one day the CO came in there, all this poetry on the walls. And she thought he got really mad, but he wasn't mad. He was just didn't have no other place to put the poetry. And she read it, this is pretty good. She even took pictures of it. And then eventually gets out and he becomes a poet. And so we're working with him, and he's going now into institutions, working with people with his poetry. And he also does djembe, drums, he teaches them drums. So in other words, there's a lot of ways to give back. And if you want to write, I would suggest just write, tell your story. Here's one thing I would recommend. Tell the truth in it, but if you need to change names, because sometimes you have to, you can do that later. Don't rat on nobody, don't start exposing everybody, you just keep it truthful. But I had to make sure that I wasn't, even in always running, these are real people. And they're in prison and they're reading the book. And I got letters from guys saying, I read the book, I saw what you did. It's all happened, but you saved us. In other words, I didn't call them out, I didn't put their names with the real crimes. You know what I'm saying? You got to do stuff to do that, but keep that story real. And then it'll probably get over.
When you started your book off, did you start off with a thesis, or did you just go basically off like a storyline? Because that's confusing. Because in the story, there's a bunch of stuff you're going to cover, and in the thesis, you're basically focused on one idea, So that's where I've had problems with is the beginning, you know what I mean? That's crazy, but I'm going to look at your book and see how it's structured. Basically.
What I did, and they're structured differently than this one. The first book, it was like a stream of consciousness. One anecdote after another, but it all was moving towards something. You know what I'm saying? It went back and forth like this. Some people say I got confused, but then if you keep reading it, it actually takes you to the end. That's another way of writing it. This one is like that. I just wrote it from the beginning, middle, and end. Started at a certain point and just went through. Wrote it completely different. Yeah, so that's one way to do it. The other way is a little bit more tricky, but I had learned how to develop the writing where I can make it work. I wouldn't recommend doing that way. These anecdotes going back and forth, the through line. It's hard to do, but I did it. But this one, even though it's the second book, I just decided to go beginning to end, and it works. Just be careful again, be detailed, but it's okay, hide names. It's okay, you don't need to, you know what I'm saying. People will read it, so. Anybody else?
There's books out there that people tell their stories, but there's writers who actually help them write it, right?
Yeah.
They're not the actual
Ghost writers and
authors,
things.
right?
Yeah.
Reporters, things like that. So even somebody who may not have like a lot of confidence in writing,
If you know somebody you can
I
trust,
know somebody, yeah.
but make sure you trust them, because I've known people get ripped off too. So the main thing is you trust somebody and they're good writers, and you work with them and they can tell your story, that'd be good, that's fine. Freddie Negrete did his book, I helped him, but he had a writer. And I worked with that writer, make sure he wasn't gonna BS the story. So Freddie Negrete told his story. My former enemy guy, you know, he's taught his story. And in fact, we're thinking of trying to do a TV series with both our books together. We're seeing, you know, Hollywood's weird. And they won't do it, but I'm still working at it. I say they won't do it, but I'm working at it, you never know. But that's, yeah, so you can find somebody to help you write it. Just make sure you can trust them. You have a good agreement with them so they don't take all the money and run. You know what I'm saying? There's people that are scrupulous even in that world.
So why do you do this, what you're doing? Why?
You know, I think the most important thing is, like I was telling you, if it's a mystery why I'm here and my other homies aren't here, I feel that at least the one thing that's not a mystery is I gotta do something good with my life. And the best thing I could do, that's why I went back into the prisons. I didn't do all that prison time like all my homies and even my son. I went back to help others. I went back to work with them. It's like I said, I sentenced myself to a lifetime of community service. You know what I mean? No judge, I didn't go to court, nobody here, I did this myself. Because whatever I did when I was younger, I did shoot people, I did stab people, I did firebomb people's homes. I never killed nobody, and that's blessings there. But I tried. I tried really hard to kill people. It's just one of those things that it didn't work out that way, which is good. I'm really glad. But I know people who have, and they're still living good lives. You know what I'm saying? They're still doing some good. So that in itself is not a block. My thing was, I've been very fortunate. Let me do some good. Let's see what I can do. And I've done it so long that I almost don't know how to get out of it. I'm 69 years old. I'm a great-grandfather, and I'm still going into prison, still talking to people. You might want to see this thing on YouTube. If you look up my name on YouTube, a whole bunch of Luis J. Rodriguez, whole mess of things pop up. I haven't even seen most of them about me, but the one that I saw that I thought was good is Cine Mills, CINEMILLS. They do this video cast of all the former gangsters, mobsters from the Italian mob, and you know, black gangs, you know, Chicano gangs, all kind of gangs. And they had me in there, and they actually did a good job. They were asking me questions more about the criminal life, but I turned all the questions around so it could be about the positive stuff. I did talk about a few of those things, but I also talked about the world that we were in, that others were controlling, you know what I'm saying? Including the government, including the police. Now, I don't have an anti-police position. I work with police officers who are good. But in general, I think the system of the police is not good. You know what I'm saying? I think they played a big role. I saw it in Chicago, and I saw it in LA, where they participated in.
That's my phone. Sorry.
They participated in keeping gangs fighting, in one form or the other. When things went down, they kept at it. You know what I'm saying? And so I'll tell that part of the story. I also know about the CIA and the crack. You know, so I told that story about what happened with crack, how it got into our communities, and how the CIA played a role. Reason I know that because I was a journalist, and I actually was covering the Contra in Nicaragua and Honduras. I was down there. I got shot. Again, I got shot at with 50 caliber bullets, and I got bombed twice, unharmed. And again, I can't, and I'm not going to go looking for it. It's a miracle, yeah, it's a miracle, and like you're saying, put it in God's hands, but it's also a mystery. I don't have to answer all of it. A lot of good people were killed that shouldn't have been killed. I can't answer all that, you know what I'm saying? Those are things I just don't have to, I don't have to have answers for that. But but I was in that war, and I saw what was happening. I saw the planes coming in with all these weapons and ammo from the U.S. that they weren't supposed to do, and flying out with kilos of cocaine. Going into Mexico, that's how the cartels in Mexico, they weren't cartels, they were just familias that ran marijuana and then heroin. But by the time that the cocaine was coming in, they became cartels like the Colombians, big, huge, plazas and everything. If you ever, we're talking with somebody about the Norco show, they try to explain all that stuff, how it started. But it was the CIA that played a role. You know what I'm saying? People don't think, they don't know that our government played into it. Because the CIA, and I don't mind telling you guys this, their thing was to stop communism. They didn't care how they were going to do it. They would deal with drug dealers. They didn't care. They did in Afghanistan too. To stop the communists in Afghanistan, they worked with Saddam bin Laden. They worked with Taliban. They worked with all of them. Yeah, they all helped them. The heroin trade was gone, and they rebuilt it just to get rid of communism. And then, but then now the drugs are there. The drug lords are there. So that's how the Mexican cartels became. Now they're the biggest cartels. Even in South America, Mexican cartels are down there. They've overrun the Colombians. I was in Argentina and even in Ecuador. All that stuff that happened now where they killed that presidential candidate. Mexican cartels were behind it. You know what I'm saying? All this stuff is going on. But I was there and I saw it. So I don't mind telling people what I know. Our government, it's sad, our government has played a role in these things. And that's why I try to tell the young people too. Yeah, you're being used by others. Your older homies, there's more forces sitting there behind, And again, I'm not trying to say, I work with some good police officers, people who try to help people, but it's about the system of things, not so much the individuals. I hope I'm making sense. The system pulls you in, you're in it. And the system is very powerful, and you can't even find who to blame. And I'll tell you something else. I did the TV show Snowfall. I was a script consultant for 2 seasons. It was good for the first 2 seasons. I think when I left, they kind of gone down. But I told the story there. I was trying to tell it. But one of the problems I had with them is they didn't want to bring in the CIA. And I met with the producers. You got to bring him in. And then they brought him in, but they brought him in as rogue agents. And I told them they weren't rogue agents. They were good, suited Christian Americans. Good. Oliver North was a good Marine. You know what I'm saying? People think these were like a bunch of, they were good people doing terrible things. And people got to know that happens. Because they get pulled in too. They don't even know. You know what I'm saying? I tell people, look at these were good Americans that went to church on Sundays, and then during the day they're making plans that hurt our kids. They brought crack into our communities. There was no crack before. There was no crack. When I was growing up, there was no such thing as crack. There was heroin, there was weed, there was a bunch of pills, uppers, downers, there was LSD, and then all of a sudden more drugs come out. The war on drugs happens, and more drugs pops out that never existed before. And then you got fentanyl, and you got all the stuff that wasn't there either. You know what I'm saying? They keep adding more and more. And so I tell people these things. I don't mind telling people the truth of things. To me, that's important. Anyway, so that's part of the story, just so people know. I know what's happening. I know that some of the prisons, the prisons themselves are wary about me. But I tell them, I'm just going to tell the truth. I'm not going to quote water it down, but I'm not here to blame all you all. I'm just not. I'm not here to jump on you. I met some good, believe it or not, some good CEOs. And I know one CEO helped my son. A lieutenant, he helped my son because he was getting in trouble because he quit all the gangs. And you know how it is. When you're in the gang and you quit all the gangs in the prison, they come after you. And one CEO helped him. When a former enemy of his, from a former enemy gang, he saw him, are you real? You're really not into gangs no more? If you're for real, I'll help you, because they wanted to kill him. They put him in a cell block with his former enemy. You know how that goes. And they were all trying to kill him in the cell block. It was in Pontiac. And he said, I will watch out for you, but you got to be for real, because if you ain't for real, I'm not gonna do anything. And even his former enemies help him. You know what I'm saying? So I know there's good people everywhere, but the system of things, we get pulled in. And that's what people have to understand.
I think Reggie asked a real good question before, right? But I think I'd like to follow up on that. I remember when I interviewed you from my thesis back like 10 years ago. You said a lot of things that I remember, but one of the biggest things that I remember you saying was that I asked you about your mentor, your youth worker. I forgot what y'all called them back in the day. But you said that, you know, you don't keep in contact with him because he burned out, right? And so you have a lot of street outreach workers here, people from other professions, man, 25, 10, sometimes 2 years, some of them have been in prison, some have never, like, but all that we have in common is the love to do it, right?
Yeah.
And that happens a lot. Like, what can you like give advice on trying to like stop or prevent or go through or get through burnout from our respective jobs?
Well, there's a couple of things. One is you gotta get spiritually renewed any way you can, in your own way. You know what I'm saying? If you don't find your renewal, you'll get burned out. And if that means getting away, if that means just whatever you do to get renewed on your own, then do that. It's very important because a lot of the guys doing this work, they don't have that. They're not gonna make it. And two, you just gotta love those kids so much, even when they get killed or even when they backslide. Even my son, he went to prison. I think he was gonna make it. You still gotta love them. You know what I'm saying? You still gotta care for them. And if they walk away, that's on them. But I won't walk away. I hope I'm making sense. Like again, the story about my mentor. He's in my book. I was running. Nobody gave him a blueprint. He just knew intuitively, I gotta stand by this kid. And I was going through hell, and I in and out of jails, and then the heroin, and he was trying to get me off, but I kept going back. He kept standing there. I'm sure he angry at me, pissed off at me, cussed me out, but he never did in front of me. He was trying to set me straight. He never condoned anything I did, but he didn't leave me off the hook either. You know what I'm saying? And he kept coming back. And when I was going to jail, nobody would show up. Even in juvenile hall, my parents wouldn't show up. They were supposed to, because then they were making war to the state if your parents don't show up, you know. But he would come and he would be there helping me every step of the way. And he stood by me, but he got burned out, man. It was too hard, too much. I might have burned him out, you know. I might have been the guy. It was too hard because we give these poor adults a hard time. But as you know, you're actually impacting them. You may not see it immediately, but what he did with me years later, those seeds sprouted. He couldn't see it immediately, but they sprouted. I learned a lot from him. And by the time I went back to him, trying to say, he says, I don't want it. He didn't want his real name on my book. He didn't want to be okay. That's fine. I haven't talked to him. I actually called him one time, and he was okay, but he was not. He just, and I just thanked him anyway. He did good. Whatever he did, he did good. So find a spiritual way to renew. Connect what you can. You know what I'm saying. Just get renewed. Sometimes it's art. Sometimes it's doing I renew a lot of ways. One of the ways I renew is my writing. My writing is my spiritual path. It's one of them, not the only one. I actually go, as people probably know, Native American spiritual practice is what I do. I do sweat lodges. I don't proselytize, I don't try to get people in there. We have a sweat lodge that my son and me go to. It's a recovery lodge for all the addicts and alcoholics. And so we go in there. It's Native Americans and Chicano kids, Central Americans, we all work together. And it's not religious in that you can be in there as a Christian, you can be in there as a non-Christian, you're all welcome, everybody's welcome. And that's fine, you pray whoever you want to. It's just the ceremony is this old sweat lodge ceremony that the indigenous people in this land have done for thousands of years. That's what I do. It helps. It's not a church, I don't have to, but I bring a lot of kids there, I bring a lot of troubled kids. I even had Father Greg Boy of Homeboy Industries. He came to me. A lot of kids don't like his church stuff, even though he's a really good priest, you know. He says, but I want him to find something, so we'll bring him over with me. He was good about it. I thought he'd be like closed off, hey man, you know, they gotta go the Catholic way, he's a Jesuit. But he says, no, I want him to find something. I see your work, can we bring some kids? So we did. I even invited him to come to Sweat Lodge, he had never come. But he was good with bringing some of the kids that didn't quite fall into the church stuff. I love people like that, because they know that you see, God works in mysterious ways. There's no way you can just put it in a box and it works. And so some of them go into the church, they're fine. You know, they're doing good. So anyway, that's what I would say. And give yourself those breaks. And if you got kids, take care of your kids, man. You know, you can't abandon your kids when you're working with other kids. You know what I mean? Make sure your kids are in good shape. I don't want to take too much more of your time, but maybe one more question or something, or?
Well, I just met last week with a group of parents, mothers, lost their child. One was took the child to California, came back for just 2 days to visit the mom, shot. The parents, all the parents, they just wanted, we want justice. We want that person who did this to come up and, because we want justice. What do you do in that situation?
So here's one thing I've done this a lot. I've done this really high-level restorative justice stuff. And I say high-level because a lot of restorative justice, I think, is not done well. It's not just about victims yelling and screaming to the perpetrator, you know, and the perpetrator has stood there to stand and take it, you know. And what it really is, and I do it with the Navajo reservation more than anybody else, because they have a better program. And I'll tell you this one story, it's in the book here. There's one Navajo kid, and the only reason I got to meet him, he loved my book over his way. And I was going to the Navajo reservation working with the kids there, and he ended up at 16 years old killing a Navajo police officer. He was on, I think it was speed, crystal meth, he was on something, and he ended up choking this guy, killed him. Well, the families know each other, because Navajo Res is huge, but they all know each other. So the families are pissed off, and they know each other, you know, and they wanted this kid thrown away. But the tribe met, and the state wanted to try him and give him a death penalty. But because it was a Navajo reservation, the tribe said, you can't do that. We're a sovereign nation. We got to try him, and we got to do what we got to do. And the state was really adamant, no, he did murder. It's a death penalty. No, the state couldn't get it. So they moved the state out, and then they did it. And then what they did, they got the family together, including the family of the Navajo officer that loved their son, loved their family guy, and got his family. And there was a story that he wrote me a letter telling me the story. And he never told anybody the story. I think people knew about it, but I don't know if they even brought it up. He brought it up. When he was 7 years old, on the res, he was with his 3-year-old little brother by himself. Because the family was out of work or whatever. They're playing around, he finds a gun. He's 7 years old. He gets the gun, he's playing, you know, hey. His little 3-year-old brother, hey, they're all playing, shoots his little brother. Kid falls over, and he writes in this letter, man, it's like he's got this language, and he went over this, he saw the blood coming out, and his little brother says his name, and closes his eyes, and he doesn't know what to do, so he gets his little brother, puts him in the back of a pickup truck, but he's running because he doesn't know how to drive. So he's running, and the nearest house is like way down, you know. He finds the nearest house, they come back, the kid's dead. What happened though, they took him into the foster care system. You know what I mean? They messed him up. Foster care, the parents got the parents, everybody got punished. He got punished the worst. He went to foster care system, abused, everything was messed up. By the time they let him go, he was such a terribly messed over kid. So at 16, when he was on drugs, and the cops were looking for him, he went and jumped on one of the cops and choked him to death. That's a horrible thing. But I told people, you gotta hear the story. It doesn't justify anything, but it means that there's a seed there that got planted. Can we replant another seed? So I always tell people, when people say make them accountable, it isn't just a ledger where you do all this bad stuff, remember you owe this now. It's about an account, a story. Change the story. You see what I'm saying? Accountability means changing the story. And he needed to have his story changed, and the family needed to see it differently. Well, they finally all agreed. They didn't want this kid put away. So they put in an agreement that from 16 to age 21, he would be given skills, a lot of care. He would be institutionalized, but they would spend time with him. It would be Native Americans, not white people, because white people were like, yeah, let's get this kid, you know. They worked with him, gave him some skills. By the time he was 21, the family agreed, because they had a choice. If he doesn't reform, doesn't get better, we'll put him in another institution for the rest of his life or something. They liked where he was, and they let him go. Can you imagine he murdered somebody, gets out to her? Well, that happens all the time, but not with this kind of care. He comes out, and I got to know him because he wrote me letters when he was in the institution, and he read my book, so I got to know him. I watched him. He got married a Hopi girl, had kids, started his own business. Now he lives in Arizona, Flagstaff, outside the race, got his own business with the skill that he learned. And he's doing really good. I had to tell you that story because to me, it's like there's a way to go to change the story. I get it, you want revenge. Even when Freddie's son was killed, he could have gotten a whole bunch of people to kill whoever killed him. You know what I'm saying? He knows people. And we had to talk about it with him. Says, you know what, can we do something so that no more people die? No, what can we do? And that's what we did. And nobody else got hurt. A lot of people came together, me and him, rival gangs, OGs, kind of old guys sitting there trying to help these young people understand the gravity, the weight of what has happened, and how not to keep doing that kind of thing. So it's the kind of work I love to do. It may not always work and it doesn't get a lot of resources, but I've seen it work. I'll give you another story that has to do with the Navajo Rest too. This was immediately. A drunk Navajo woman goes around the corner. There was a black guy with his Mexican wife, and they have a 9-year-old boy. The car was stuck with a trailer. They were outside the car, and she pulls around and slams into the trailer, and the trailer pulls into the car and kills the 9-year-old kid. Can you imagine? And they were hurt too. The guy, he looked up and he was like, when he saw his son dying, on the road. It's horrible, man. See your kid. We did the same thing. We had them all meeting. And my elder there ended up putting them in these prayer meetings. We call them prayer meetings, all-night prayer meetings. All of them, including the girl that was the drunk, put them all together with the families. And those prayer meetings, a lot of tears and a lot of pain, and I'm there with them, you know what I'm saying? And they get to speak, and there's songs. They do songs in between all the singing and all the, and after all night long, they come out of there. And I know it's hard to imagine this. They come out there hugging with tears, you know what I'm saying? The girl who killed his people's son. And they were angry, and but they come out hugging, and they became friends, and they helped her go through recovery, get her off the alcohol. And they've gone to other prayer meetings since then. And I'm still in touch with these people. In other words, there's ways to go that we don't ever give space for. I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm not saying it's always gonna work, but I am saying it's better than what we keep doing. Putting people away. Death penalty, and most death penalties is so unfair anyway, it's like the only one they bother. And then a lot of people who did terrible murders don't get death penalty, but some people who made a mistake or maybe even innocent get death penalty. All kinds of things happen. You know how it goes. I don't like this this way that we think that we gotta destroy what hurt us. It's not right. You know what I'm saying? Just one last thing, in El Salvador, I went and created peace with others. We did peace there in 2012. We actually lowered the crime. El Salvador was the murder capital of the world. With MS 13, 18th Street, they brought it from LA and they took over a lot of stuff and they were killing a lot of people. And it's funny because in the LA, they can't really do that. The prison gangs control a lot of that stuff. They can kill people, but not at the level when they go to El Salvador, they went crazy. I went down there, we got peace. The government, with the US government playing a role, just put a stop to that peace. I created peace zones. You know the peace zones we used to have in Chicago? I don't know if you remember. We used to have peace zones out of the different communities. We had one in Logan Square where the gangs would meet with the adults and agree not to do drugs or drive-bys or any violence. But we had to help them get jobs, get them back to schools, help them get a sanctuary in the churches. We created that. Now, the cops wouldn't participate. We wanted the cops to say, don't harass these kids. They wouldn't participate. Eventually, the businesses wouldn't hire them, and the schools started having zero tolerance. The adults gave up on the kids. The kids were agreeing, and the adults gave up. So the violence kept going. But I love the concept. So we did it in El Salvador. We did create 12 peace zones where MS-13 and 18th Street, who were murderers, cutting each other's heads off, and just terrible stuff, sit down and they would create murals, gardens, art projects, and working jobs, talleres, workshops. They were doing really good. As soon as we even gave them certificates when they were achieving their programming, as soon as we left, to the pressure of the U.S. government, the Salvadoran army would come in there and arrest everybody, undermine everything we did. When that happened, the violence got worse. Now they have a president who has zero tolerance now. They're doing the old Chicago model. He's got the largest prison in all the Americas. Up to 40,000 gang kids will be put in for 30 years or more. They're never going to let them out. And that's where they're putting all their effort and billions of dollars being put into this. Country's so poor, ain't got nothing, but it's got billions of dollars to create this prison. If I show up in El Salvador, I will be arrested. They know my work, they know who I am. They arrested the former president of El Salvador and the former public security guy because they were supporting my peace efforts. They arrested them, the former president of the country. I can't set my foot in El Salvador. So I say that to say that's the wrong way of doing it. Yes, I think it's going to work immediately. People are happy. You go to El Salvador, oh, nothing with gangs anymore. They're all being put away in this prison, you know. And it was more, there's no extortion. We're all some. Yeah, you're going to pay a big price for that. There was a way to do it without doing that. There's a way to do it where everybody could meet and share and agree. And they destroyed that. So I'm just mentioning all this. It's part of the work that I think we have to continue. Instead of punishment, instead of, you know, and I get it. And I can't tell people, you're not going to have that pain. And I can't even tell you, you're not going to want to put these people away forever. But give us the space to try to create a healing out of this. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I'd rather go there. You know what I'm saying? Go get the healing for all of us, not just for one. Anyway, I want to leave you guys here. I know it's getting late. I really appreciate your attention. God bless all the work you're doing. Please don't give it up. Hang in there, do what you got to do. And I really, really honor you for the work that you do. I really, really do. So thank you.
Thank you for coming, man. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Tell people how
You can get, I have a bookstore online.